As you probably know, we're coming up to a very important Queensland election this Saturday, the 31st of October. And Ricardo Bosi is running as an independent for the Nicklin electorate. And we also have Tracy Takax-Thorne, who is running as an independent for Currumbin. The main purpose for this evening is for the members of those electorates to get an opportunity to ask Ricardo questions relating to the local issues, which hopefully will help them decide how to vote. It's also a chance for all the other attendees here tonight to ask Ricardo any questions on a more national level. So we do hope that what you hear tonight will resonate with you. And if it does, we would welcome your support. Whether that's voting for Ricardo and Tracy, if you're able to, or you can help by spreading the message this week and beyond the elections. If you'd like to know more about how you can support the Australia One Party, then go to the website and complete the form if you haven't already, and a local coordinator will be in touch with you.
Good evening, Tracy. Thank you for that kind introduction. Good evening, all. Thank you very much for taking up, allowing us to take up some of your precious time. We appreciate that there are many demands on you, and it's an indication of the importance that you place on this election, which is heartening because many don't actually do that. Tonight's format, I'll give a brief introduction and make a few opening statements, and then I'd like the majority of the evening to be handed over to you to ask as many questions as you like. I'll remain as long as there are questions. The one thing I want you to leave tonight with is a clear indication of who we are, what we stand for, so you can make an informed decision at the ballot box this Saturday. So first statement I'd like to make is answer a question that's probably waiting locked and loaded, which is why am I not in the electorate of Nicklin and campaigning in person? Well, the plan was to get up to Queensland. Our son finished his HSC and we were coming up to Queensland, and then the COVID nonsense struck. And so that put a dampener on our moves. Then not only that, my wife suffers from MS, and the drugs that she takes when she's having a bad attack knock out her immune system, which makes her susceptible to any infection at all. And so she's basically housebound at the moment. And so it's impossible for her to leave. And being her full-time carer, and although she doesn't like me mentioning this, being a modest woman, that also involves carrying her to and from the bathroom and things like that. So there's a high degree of involvement with her. So I can't just leave her with the kids here at home and then travel up north. She literally relies on me on a day-to-day basis. On top of that, we're homeschooling the kids. So we've got our hands full, and unfortunately circumstances have prevented us from actually getting up to Nicklin. But that in no way diminishes our commitment to the electorate of Nicklin and the people in that electorate. Okay, so next point I'd like to make is this has been an interesting experience entering the realm of politics. And just to answer some other questions that might be wondering, because in the last week, I've been accused of being a pedophile, a Mason, a white supremacist, a racist, and today a Zionist. So that's been a lot of fun batting that back. Unequivocally, I'm none of those things. I'm a simple soldier who is a Christian, and my priorities are God, family, and country. Although if you ask my children, you'd think those last two are reversed because we've been putting a lot of time into this activity, and they have unfortunately had to bear the brunt of that. So I say that as a bit of a lighthearted approach, but these are the serious questions that people have been asking of me because they think I'm a deep state operative that has come out of the special ops world to continue the work of the cabal. Nothing could be further from the truth. My wife and I returned from overseas after a long-term contract in the Middle East, 5 years. We returned 6 years ago now, and we couldn't believe how degraded Australia had become. We'd watched from a distance, but we couldn't see how bad it was till we actually arrived back in Australia. And every aspect of life in Australia had been degraded, from the education to weird gender ideologies, through to federal and state debt, the burden upon the people, bushfires made worse by the lack of backburning, the lack of control of the land from farmers, the political imposition, the lack of political freedom. We couldn't believe how badly it had degraded. And so we agreed that we had to do something about it. So I ran as a candidate, a Senate candidate for Cory Bernardi's Conservatives. But after that failed attempt, he deregistered the party. And a few of us decided there was still a fight to be had because the country was still sliding towards some sort of weird dystopian totalitarian regime. And we were deeply concerned. And it was a considered decision simply because we knew this would cost us everything, and it has. But that's as it is, because we understood that and we accept that without any complaint. It's the nature of the job. And so here we are. So we set up the Australia One Party about a year ago. And the tagline we initially started with, because it kept coming up, it's not about left and right, it's about right and wrong. And that was the fundamental start point, because the left-wing, right-wing model, if it ever made any sense, and I doubt that it ever did in an historical context, certainly had no resonance today. All the major parties were veering hard left, and just simple decency was now considered aberrant. And it was insulting just to good, silent majority Australians who understood what was required to build a safe, healthy, prosperous nation. And so we were lumbered into this extreme position because the rest of the country was going one way. And I'm sure that many of you have an idea of the nature of the threat. Some of you may have seen the videos that we've done, and I've explained in quite some detail the major threats facing us. But this is not just a state election. This election has national consequences, because the globalists, and we can talk about this in detail later, and please feel free to ask any question you like. Don't be afraid. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat, but I can tell you it's not a conspiracy when it's true. And the data is there. So feel free to ask any question you like and ask me to justify my position. But we knew that the globalists are taking control of Australia. Australian politicians of all parties have sold out to the Chinese Communist Party, with revelations in the last few days alone indicating that there are something like 30,000 Chinese operatives within Australia. Most of our politicians are on the take, and you don't need evidence for that, just common sense. When you have the deputy leader of the Labor Party saying that we should have closer ties with China, and we have Paul Keating, former Prime Minister, saying the security agencies should be more friendly towards China. We have a government for the last 60 years that have been destroying our manufacturing, our primary production, all in order to destroy the Australian economy, and there's evidence of that as well. And I'll speak to that if you wish. And so this election has national implications for us. New Zealand recently, in fact, today announced that they are setting up camps to put people into in order to deal with the COVID alleged crisis. Well, it's only an alleged crisis because there's no crisis. But they're actually imposing on us, I believe, a totalitarian system which will include the Chinese-style social credit score, where they track us and they are allowed to track us and punish us or reward us according to our subservience. So this is a national election. This is critical. Liberal and Labor in Queensland, there's little to distinguish between them. And this is not a criticism of Liberal voters, I used to be one, nor a criticism of Labor voters, because I've been one. Both parties have sold out their membership, and we have attracted, and there are many, many thousands of Australians who are now supporters of Australia One in every state, and we have state coordinators in every state, and we're building the party. And we have Liberal, Labor, and Nationals all sitting very comfortably side by side, because we know it's about just building a good, decent nation. And so I've got hardcore unionists right alongside busy entrepreneurs, and they are very happy to be sitting side by side. So that, by way of introduction, is where we've come from and why we are here. And so now I'll open up the floor to questions, and Tracy, if you can then moderate, please, and I'll respond. Now, I've not seen any of these questions. I've not been pre-briefed, so the answer you get is exactly as I see it. And I'll say one more thing before we start, and this will help clarify in the back of your minds exactly who we are and what our goal is, because this is fundamental. It's easy for us to answer a policy question because the prism through which we view the question links directly to our strategic intention. And let me read that to you, and so you'll understand. Our purpose is to save Australia, and that's pretty straightforward because we know it's in a bad way. And it's not beginning to fall, it is falling. The method. Now, intention comprises three parts: purpose, method, end state. The method. Our goal is to create a moral political party that empowers citizens to reach their highest individual potential so that collectively all can participate in the reformation of Australia. Now, let me repeat that because this is important. Every word has been carefully chosen and is pregnant with meaning. Our goal is to save Australia, but the method by which we save the country is to rely upon the Australian people, and we do that by creating a moral political party that empowers its citizens to reach their highest individual potential so that collectively all can participate in the reformation of Australia. How do we know we're successful? We look at the end state. And every question I'll get tonight, I'll be viewing it through this prism. We wish to create an Australia which is a moral, sovereign, self-reliant, Christian Western democracy, which is economically powerful, militarily intimidating, politically free, culturally vibrant, and socially cohesive. And so that's our method. So every question that I'm asked tonight will either contribute or detract from that end state. If it contributes towards political freedom, it's in. If it moves away from political freedom, then it's out. Because we believe that, and it makes sense, that sovereignty comes from the people, not from government. The people are sovereign. And the people select the government and with the consent of the people, that government governs the country. But when that government loses the support of the people have the right to remove it and replace it with something new. All sovereignty comes from every individual in this country, not the other way around. Okay, with that long-winded introduction, Tracy, could you please dish out the questions?
Yeah, no problem. Okay, there was a question straight away on the chat, so I'm going to ask that one first. It says, hi, Mark Latham appears to have seen the light and is making great inroads via the New South Wales One Nation Party. Have you considered One Nation? And if not, how do they differ from your views?
Yeah, Mark Latham is doing some excellent work in the upper house, particularly in terms of getting education, for example, back on track. I am less enthused with his religious freedom bill because, not because I'm against religious freedom, but I am against what some religions claim to be and what they are not. And what goes for one goes for the other. And if you want more detail on that specifically, please ask me later, but let's focus on One Nation. I love the work of Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts in particular. Malcolm is an absolute champion, but the way the party is run doesn't suit me. We have our model for the actual mechanics of the party, the organizational arm. It's a member-driven party, it's not driven from the top. And that's reflected in our constitution, where our members get to select their candidates and our members get to recall their candidates or even their executive if they feel that they are not meeting the needs of the people in accordance with the Constitution. So on an organizational level, we're not big fans of top-down. We're big fans of bottom-up. So that is entirely, it's antithetical. The way One Nation is run is antithetical. Their policies apparently seem very similar, but I guess we've got stronger lines on some points and a lot freer on others. For example, the religious freedom one, as I mentioned, not all religions are created equal. For example, just up the road in Noosa, you've got a Satanist church. Now, I'm sorry, but my view is that Australians get to choose what sort of nation we have and what constitutes a religion. See, political freedom, I think, is absolutely important, but it requires a moral people to wield that sort of liberty. And unfortunately, there are some segments of our society that use our goodness against us. So I'm not in favor at all of the Satanists having the same status as a Christian church or a Jewish temple, for example. It's fundamentally different. We've got to where we are based on our culture, and at the center of every culture is the spiritual beliefs. Satanism and a few others don't contribute to that. So there are some fundamental differences in our views with One Nation, quite apart from their organizational setup. We are for the people, bottom up, and we wish to rebuild Australia in line with what the people desire in terms of how we should be run, and One Nation has made no movements in that direction. Let me give you an example. The Constitution we have has been illegally amended by many governments. Initially, or many times, but most recently, I guess, in 1973, when Gough Whitlam introduced the concept of the Queen of Australia, which wasn't correct. And then in 1986, the Australia Act removed the Queen. And these are all unconstitutional. And whether you're a monarchist or not is not the point. The governments have been dismantling our Constitution illegally. And so what we wish to do, and what we need to do, is go back to the original Constitution, 1901, with the lawful amendments, and start from there. But what the people of Australia have found out, courtesy of Comrade Dan in Victoria, is that a lot of what he's doing is not unlawful. So what we discover is that the Constitution is manifestly inadequate for Australia in the 21st century. And one of our foundational policies that we must go back to 1901, but then have a constitutional convention where the Australian people get to decide what they want and how they believe the country should be governed. And I'm not talking about this quick fix, replace the Queen with a president model. That's been correctly described by Professor David Flint, Emeritus Professor of Law, as the politician's constitution, because that allows the Prime Minister more easily sack the President than his own driver. And it's a move towards totalitarianism. So this requires a deep level of understanding, patience, and wisdom to design a constitution that the people know will ensure that they retain their power. Now, One Nation has no such policy. And so there are many others, but on a foundational issue, whilst we look very similar, we have dived deeper into the problems that face this country, and certainly dive deeper into the multifaceted solution required to fix it. And so as much as I wish One Nation well, and I applaud the work that Pauline Hanson has done over many, many, many years, we may be in coalition, I guess, with them at some point in the future, but we're certainly not going to amalgamate with them.
Okay, there's another question that kind of leads quite well from there. It's the one about Clive Palmer. Where does United Australia Party and Clive Palmer fit in with things?
It's hard to say. It's hard to understand Clive Palmer, the man. It's hard to understand the UAP. The short answer, so we can move on to something else, it's very similar to One Nation. Much of what they do, I appreciate. I appreciate Clive Palmer's courage in stepping forward. But organisationally, it is not aligned with the way we wish to do things. And policy-wise, it looks okay, but we'd prefer to go our own way. I guess like many others, and this is the reason why we started the party, we're tired of trusting people and then being let down. And so that's why my wife and I and a handful of volunteers have said, that's it, we've got to do this ourselves because we just don't trust anybody else. We've been betrayed just once too many times. And we face that same challenge now. People look at us and say, well, why should we trust you? And my answer is always the same. Don't trust me. Trust yourself. You get to run your branch. You get to run the electorate. You get to run the party.
Okay, so going to one of the questions that I was given earlier today, is there any way to stop politicians from changing parties midstream? An example is a One Nation candidate who then moved to become an independent and moved again to another party after receiving support from the public under the policies of One Nation.
Yeah, that's a real threat to us. In fact, we've had offers from members of other parties who wish to come across, and I've made it abundantly clear, it's a betrayal of the trust and the money that people have put into you. And any enterprise that begins on a deception is destined to fail. So what I say to them is this: resign your position, start with nothing, risk all, and stand as an A1 candidate. But the way you become a candidate is don't ring me up and offer me money, which again has been done, and again I have refused. Now, here's $50,000, here's $100,000, I'd like to be a Senate candidate. It doesn't work that way. In our party, as I said, the members get to choose their representatives. And they have to earn that. They actually have to earn it, and it'll be in the form of a primary. For example, pick the electorate, and you've got half a dozen people that want to be candidates. They have to demonstrate to the collected members of that electorate that they are the right person for the job, and there'll be a primary, and they'll be on stage, half a dozen of them, answering questions, much like the American primaries, where they have to demonstrate why they are the best candidate for the job. And then once that is done, they get to represent the electorate. Now, how do we make sure they don't jump ship? Well, our candidates will be signing a document which carries with it a stiff financial penalty. Now, the Constitution prevents people from influencing a parliamentarian from doing anything, and that's as it should be. Now, we're not going to influence their policy, but if they wish to leave, that's fine. There'll be a $250,000 bill being delivered to them saying, we backed you, we paid for you. A lot of people have put their hard-earned money into you, and if you wish to leave, that's fine, but you must pay back that money that is not yours. We have to make sure that these people don't jump ship. Now, if at any stage we've got a candidate or a member, let's say, who jumps ship, there's another little trick we've got up our sleeve, and that's a recall election. We'll have them in the party, and when we become the party of government, we will also introduce that nationwide. And what a recall election is this? Imagine we've got a representative, could be an A1 or anybody, any party, and they've made promises. If 20% of the electorate decide that they are breaking their promises, then they have to face a recall. They are sacked, and they have to recontest their election. Now, what this does, this makes the candidate and this makes the MP responsive 24/7, 365 to the members of the electorate. Because at the moment, they make a promise, ignore the promise for 3 years, come back 3 years later and say, vote for me again. Well, that's because they're beholden to the party machine. Under our system, the candidate is beholden to the electorate. And at any point, that electorate decides, 20% of the electorate decides that the person is not meeting its obligations, they get sacked. You get to sack your MP. So if you've got an A1 candidate that wants to jump ship and go to Labor, then all the people that voted for that person can force a recall, and they are forced to recontest that election. So there's no value now in jumping ship. It'll cost you money and you might lose the job. So there's two very hard practical ways that we will stop people jumping ship. And that way, again, it's a very practical way that the members of the party, and in time, the members of Australia, the people of Australia get to control their MPs 24/7, 365.
Great. And the next question from the same lady. Parties today are infiltrated by those that come in under, for example, the LNP, but their voting is always green. Is there a way to make sure that the parties have honest selectors?
Yeah, we were advised very early on by a very canny former politician who's a very good man. He's extremely talented. And he said, make the Constitution bulletproof. You've got to make sure that they cannot get a hold of it because you will be infiltrated. It's like having fly screen doors. You've got to have them, otherwise the Aussies get in. And that's the Constitution. And as unfortunate as it's been, we haven't finished our Constitution yet. It's still with the lawyers, but it's taken a long time to make it as bulletproof as possible. And that's how we stop the infiltration. It's not unlike a constitution for a nation. You want to make it hard for anybody to take over. And if you look at, for those of you who are students of politics, and particularly the United States, the Founding Fathers of the United States ensured that there were points of friction between the various arms of government to make it hard for a despot to take control. And we've done the same within the Australia One Constitution. It is just hard to get the numbers. You can't branch stack, for example. We have branches that'll be a minimum of 5, maximum of 30. Other parties, you can have multiple, you have as many people in the branch as you want. And they can swamp the state council or the federal council. These are the hard mechanical things that we will stop. The first hurdle is the working with children's check, and you'd be surprised the number of people, and this is basic. And we had one extremely talented individual who's been making contributions to the party, but even he quit on the basis that we needed a working with children's check. And we've had many, many more. And that's great because it's the first step, it keeps the pedophiles out. And secondly, we know exactly with whom we're dealing because we have, working with Children's Check requires a name, an address. And this isn't just a political party because I wouldn't do it just for a political party either. This is far more important than just being a political party. And it's not about votes. Just so you're clear, I get a lot of calls from people and they grace me with their wisdom, and most are pretty useful. But occasionally I get rung up in the morning and someone starts yelling down the phone at me. And I'll patiently listen. And at one point, one woman was cranky because I wasn't accepting her point of view. And she said, "Don't you want votes?" I said, "No, we don't want votes." And that shut her up for about 15 seconds. It's not about votes. It's about saving the country. Politics is the means by which it's achieved, but it's not an end in itself. Getting political power is not the end state. As I said, the end state is to create this nation. And so we keep the party constitution as tight as possible. We make it difficult for people to infiltrate. And if they do infiltrate, amendments to the constitution are extremely difficult to achieve. And anything that smacks of an idea that's not consistent with our aims and objectives and our policies. For example, let's say the Greens wander in and they start pushing for full-term abortion, and 2 or 3 branches will start pushing for full-term abortion, which is anathema to us, and it's certainly not in the Constitution. We're going to ramp that back. They will immediately be removed from the party because that level of divergence won't be accepted, because we are very clear who we are, what we stand for. And anybody that tries to divert us from our path will be removed. And that's how we keep them out. The Constitution, the rules, and a clear sense of identity, who we are and why we exist.
Thank you. I've got one here which was texted to me by Lisa. It says, would Ricardo be looking at reducing parliamentarians' expenditure or reducing the number of? I randomly looked at Peter Dutton's and he spent $203,659 in April to June quarter with 151 MPs. That's a lot of expenses, including wages.
Yeah, it's not even, yes, the short answer is yes. We'll be making mandatory real-time release of politicians' expenditures online. Real time. So you know exactly what they've spent and why they've spent it. And you can look it up anytime you want to and see that Peter Dutton spent Y dollars on X activities, and if it doesn't smell right, you can kick up a fuss. That's your money. Real-time disclosure of politicians' expenses. Now, it's not just what they spend in the execution of their duties, although that needs a close look at. We'll be doing more than that. We'll be investigating any unexplained wealth that MPs seem to retire with. How does a guy on a couple of $100,000 a year buy a $17 million house? You know, this has got to be investigated. On top of that, there are little perks. I'm not sure if you're aware of this one, but they get an allowance, an accommodation and food allowance, I guess, for when the house sits and they're in Canberra or they're in Brisbane, away from home. There's all politicians. And then they use that allowance to, I don't know, maybe rent a house, and that house might be owned by a mate, and the other mate also owns a house, and you rent their house, and they're using their allowances to buy houses. They can't claim an allowance on their own property, but they'll rent somebody else's out. Do you understand how it works? So these little tricks that the pollies use to milk you dry. Once again, real-time disclosure of all expenditure online, and you can check them up. So it's not just that how much they spend, it's how they spend it and when they spend it. But yes, we'll be ramping this back quite dramatically. And you'll be surprised at how much the state of Queensland will save when MPs' expenses are up online in real time.
Okay, another question. Have you been personally approached or contacted directly by any Premier or the PM?
No, they're terrified of me. I'm not allowed on TV. I've been told Sky News doesn't want me on. They won't have me on. don't expect to see me on TV at any point, anytime soon. Now, that's a badge of honor because the last time I was on Sky, I made a discourteous comment about communist China. And word is that that's not acceptable because China owns Australia, apparently. And then I took the mickey out of the producers for cutting that comment out of the segment that was online afterwards. And TV producers, being as robust as lead crystal, decided they didn't like being criticised, and so they're never going to let me back on again. The lawyers won't let me back on. So I've been approached by nobody. The Liberal, Labor, Nationals, they all put me last on the how to vote. And again, that tells you a lot. Now I'm on the record as saying, who do you preference, Liberal or Labor? Well, there's two parts to that question. First part is I allow people to make their own mind up who they wish to preference. My personal opinion is I want to burn them both to the ground because both have betrayed Australians for decades. Let me just go back to 1980, where a Senate committee investigated what is called the New International Economic Order. And in this 1980 report, it was understood that we had to dismantle our economy, every part of it, primary, secondary, dismantle it in order to help developing nations grow. Guess which one of those developing nations still is today? China. It's still classified as a developing nation. Why? Where did South Korea's extraordinary automotive industry come from? The destruction of the West. That's how they did it. Our goal is to reverse that process. We're going to reverse the betrayal of the Liberal, Labor, Nationals and Greens by making Australia self-reliant. We're a fortunate country. We don't need the rest of the world, believe it or not. We have a massive landmass. We have a sea air gap, so it's physically hard to get here, which is great. We have no contiguous borders with another nation. We have all the resources we need: minerals, gold, uranium, coal, zinc, copper, lead, you name it. We've got everything we need. Bauxite. We have farms. We have farmers. We have everything that we need. And so we're going to be the self-reliant nation, because what's happened, what the Liberal and Labor parties have done, and why I want to burn them both to the ground, is they've created a single point of failure. If we want drugs, we have to go to China. If we want an export market, we have to go to China. Now, this isn't an accident. And no smart businessman, and whilst I spent 24 years in the military, I also spent 20 years in business. And no smart businessman or businesswoman creates a single point of failure ever. And yet that's what the entire nation of Australia has become. And so, the Liberal and Labor parties, I don't back either. And no Premier nor Prime Minister is ever going to call me. But I will look at them through the other side of cell bars when we lock them up for treason.
Thank you. Okay, another question. As the governing party, how can A1 eliminate opposing political agenda enforced in the schools, state and private, and universities?
The curriculum is so degraded as to make it dangerous. As I said at the beginning, my wife and I homeschooled because we saw exactly what our children weren't being taught. So we voted with our feet. It was admitted just recently that this is certainly in New South Wales, and I don't doubt it's the same in Queensland, that the teachers' union didn't tell the Minister for Education the Safe Schools program was still in part being implemented. Now, what the hell has the teachers' union got to do with this? I love unions because unions are needed to protect workers. I get that. But where a union decides that it has the power to shift the direction, their job is not to control the curriculum. Their job is to protect teachers and make sure teachers get a decent wage and decent conditions. But they have bypassed the minister. They have bypassed the will of the people. So how do we fix it? Once again, the people decide. You do it. See, my political parties ignore what you want. They just impose what they want. Well, we're being upfront. We say, this is our policy. This is what we're doing. And if we don't do it, you can sack us. But then we'll throw some hard issues in there. For example, universities. Universities at the moment are opening up their doors to just about anybody because the government's making sure that the debt will be paid. So there's no incentive for the university to produce useful graduates. It's just a sausage machine, and they get the money. Well, one of our policies will be we strip all funding from universities if there is no direct link to the employability of their graduates. And all of a sudden, you watch both the sandstone and the red brick universities stop teaching our kids rubbish and lumbering them with a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 bill, and actually start realizing university is important. And it's not a free ride for the socialists to indoctrinate kids. The second part to that funding is they are not to receive, if they receive funding from any totalitarian regimes, like the ANU does from Qatar, they won't be funded by us. And if they teach ideologies that are antithetical to Australian safety, they'll have their ability to do that removed. This is not a game. We've been under attack for decades. We've been infiltrated for decades. And that's why Australia's in the parlous condition that it is. This is not an accident. It's not a mistake. And both parties have been stitching us up. So we'll do a root and branch review of all education, and we'll make sure they learn the best they possibly can in terms of fundamentals. Kazakhstan has better literacy and numeracy than Australia. Kazakhstan. Think about it. Kids in China want to be astronauts. Guess what kids in Australia want to be? YouTubers. There is something fundamentally wrong with the future of this nation. So a root and branch reconstruction of the curriculum. And once again, our policy will be out there. If you don't like it, if we don't do it, you sack us. That's the way it's going to be. So we get right into it. And everybody will be held to account. That infiltration is very specific. I'll just finish with this. And this is a New South Wales example. The Secretary of the Department of Education in New South Wales is a guy called Mark Scott. Does anyone remember who Mark Scott was? Mark Scott was the managing director of the ABC, the official arm of the Communist Party in Australia. And he moves from there to education. Now, what the hell does Mark Scott know about education? Not a lot, but I can tell you what I think, in my opinion, he's picked for. He's willing to do the bidding of his masters, and his masters are not the Australian people. That's how it works. That's how deep this goes. And so it's going to take, this is a multi-decade long program that we have ahead of us. It's breathtaking in its scope. Tracy, I'm not sure if I can share screen.
Hang on a sec, let me have a look.
Let me just see if I can share this, because I'd like to show you something in terms of the complexity of the problem we are facing. So once again, you understand this isn't just about getting a few votes and then getting into Parliament. So I can tell you, it is a loathsome experience. I've had a career that I've been quite proud of, both in military and business. The most insulting thing I've had to endure is being called a politician. But that's okay. I'm happy to put up with that in order to show you. Let me show you the meta system underpinning our project, our enterprise here. Now, can you see that at all, Tracy?
No, not yet. But I did enable. The multiple participants can share.
Right, that's okay. Let's try again. Tell me when you can see it.
Oh yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, that's our intention. You remember I read that to you. Now I want to show you how this strategy is outlined. And you won't see this in any other political party because they can't read, let alone write. Okay, let's see if we can get this to move to the next slide. Okay. If you have a look at this, is called the synchronization matrix. Whenever you plan a large complex operation, you've got to synchronize lines of operation by phase. If you go across the top, phase one, build the party, win the people, win representation, win balance of power, win government, phase six, classified. Now, there are several lines of operations. You can see them there, and there's a series of objectives to be achieved under each one, and they must be synchronized. The first is politics. And as you can see, that's only one of 6 lines of operation about how we intend to do what we're going to do. The other 5 are classified for the time being. They'll be revealed in time. And even the executive aren't fully aware of all of it, because like any good operation where we are being attacked, you keep it on a need-to-know basis, and people over time will understand what we're doing. But everything that we're doing is intended to achieve that end state. And so we synchronize across a range of lines of operation. Now, the best analogy I can give you is this. The D-Day landings at Normandy, the Navy just didn't turn up and then ferry the infantry to the beach and hope they made it up the hill in the face of MG-42 gunfire, correct? Insanity. Now, what they did, they had several lines of operation. The first one, and unrelated, but synchronized. So they would have had initially, for example, the resistance destroying railway lines, contaminating fuel, destroying fuel depots. This would prevent the Germans from reinforcing Normandy once they understood that that was the main effort of the Allies, because the Germans didn't know where the main effort was coming. So the French resistance would have done that. Then you would have had the paratroops that were jumping in behind enemy lines to secure bridges, crossroads, high ground, strong points, in order to facilitate the advance once the infantry landed on the beach. And you can see them adrift now. Then you would have had the Navy bombard with naval gunfire support the fortifications on Normandy beaches. And then finally the Navy start delivering the infantry to the beach and then the infantry assault. So we're looking at it the same way. This is a multi-decade problem that we have to fix. It's taken decades to get us here. Everything about a good Australian life has been degraded by intention. And if you want to know a little bit about that, I'll explain it to you. But it's been quite intentional, exquisitely designed and executed strategy. And so what we need is to fight it, is to get it back again. And we have an entire generation that we have to help understand what's happened and how to get back on track. And so this is just in order to show you that this isn't just some fly-by-night scheme. Have you got me back now, guys?
Yeah.
Right. This isn't some sort of short-term fly-by-night scheme. This is a very serious enterprise that requires experienced leadership and planning, and then execution by moral and decent Australians to make sure it works, because this is going to take, to use the expression, everybody, somebody out there to make it happen. We can't outsource this anymore. We can't vote once every 3 years and hope the politicians get it right. We have unfortunately been betrayed. Now we have to fight to take our country back in every possible way. And that's why I said at the beginning, this election in Queensland is not just another state election. This is an election for the future of the country. And if you haven't learnt about the Great Reset, please Google the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum, and be prepared to be horrified what they have planned for us next year. This is not tinfoil hat stuff. In their words, they wish to reshape the entire globe. One of the promises is you will own nothing and you'll be happy. You will own nothing and you will be happy. That's their first opening promise. This is communism writ large. So after this, I sincerely hope that you do Google the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, and watch their own videos. And you'll understand that when I say that this election is for the future of Australia, you'll know it's not a statement of hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration. It's the facts. We either win in this election or we lose forever.
Thank you. Quite a few questions that have just come through. Okay. Let's have a look at this one. I heard the Commonwealth of Australia is a registered company registered in Washington. I looked it up and there it was. How did this happen and who gets the money?
Yeah, this is one part of many parts of why we're in a big mess. We thought that we were a colony of Great Britain, and then we thought we got our independence, and we thought that we are ourselves. Well, there are many stories out there. One is that we're a corporation, and that when you're born, your birth certificate is traded like a stock or a bond. And depending on how successful you are, it's worth more or less money. We know that the Constitution has been illegally amended. We know that our politicians have been corrupted. And there are many groups trying to solve the problem. There's the common law group. There are the lawful rebellion group. So there are many groups all trying to solve the problem. And this corporation is one of the problems that they need to solve. Our view is this: we wish everybody well, because there are a number of ways to solve this. Our approach, A1's approach, is to to fight according to their rules so he can get into Parliament and tear it down and rebuild it according to the wishes of the Australian people. And I get challenged by people who are worried about the corporation. They tell me that it's an invalid election because there is no constitutionality, and that's correct. And they say, well, why are you doing it then? My answer is very simple. The only way we can save the country is to have the legitimacy of the people. To get legality, the legitimacy. Let's say Tracy wins Currumbin and 16,010 people vote for Tracy. She's now MP. She has a legitimate voice to get the legality. And I understand that the election's probably illegal. I get it, but that's not the point. We can wave bits of paper all we like and say, look, I've got a piece of paper that says this. They will ignore us. Being right, the jails around the planet are full of people who are right. That doesn't help. Now, I wish all these other groups more power to their arm. I really do. And when we get in, and we will, we'll be working closely with them to help educate the Australian people on what's happened, how it's happened, and how we're going to get out of it. Legitimacy is the key. Tracy wins, I win, and we get two parliamentarians in the Queensland Parliament. We have legitimacy, and then the world must pay attention. Because right now we're just a couple of people shaking our fist at politicians and saying, you suck. And I use that crass word because that's about as effective as it is, because they will ignore us. And there are countless examples. The politicians are corrupted, the judiciary are corrupted, the constabulary are corrupted, the bureaucracy is corrupted, the media, corporations, the church, they're all corrupted. In New South Wales, we had a violent pedophile on the police board for years. And if you think Queensland's any different, you're wrong. We need legitimacy. And I hope both of us get up, but if one of us gets up, that'll be the chink in the armor. Because we will be able to then speak to the people of Nicklin and Currumbin and say, you got to listen to us now. And I certainly hope we both get in, and I hope we hold the balance of power, Trace, because their life is going to get very, very uncomfortable. And so that's it. So the corporation is an issue. It's one of many issues, and there are dozens of rabbit holes you can go into, and you'll be shocked and horrified. But once again, once you understand the problem, you've got to elevate your gaze above that and realize, how do we solve it? And that's what we've been working on for some time. A measured, calm, people-focused solution to the problem, so we can, I used to say we can give the country back to the people, but in truth, it's never been our country. Somebody else has always owned it. We're going to turn that around. We're going to turn it around. Sovereignty rests with each individual in this country. You get to decide how you are governed. You get to decide who will govern you. And if you don't like them, you sack them and get somebody else. That'll be refreshing.
Right. I've got a question now that's related to COVID. Ricardo, are you prepared to address the validity of the testing kits to expose that they are constantly showing false positives and the source of the testing kits, and they put CCP?
Yeah, we intend to have a Royal Commission into the response to COVID, because the actual testing kit, the inventor of the testing kit said you shouldn't use this kit to test it because it's not designed to do that. Everybody knows that, and yet it's been ignored. Hydroxychloroquine and zinc and vitamin C, and with erythromycin together, has been proven to fix the problem, and yet it was made a criminal offence to issue this stuff. Scott Morrison, people keep saying, if Scott Morrison only knew, he knows exactly what's going on. They know that there are no COVID deaths outside of a bad flu season. Strangely enough, nobody's died of old age or cancer or heart attacks for 9 months. Isn't that bloody amazing? It's a miracle. I believe in God. Please. So it's not just the testing kits, because fruit has tested positive for COVID. Goats have tested positive for COVID. A person who didn't actually even get the test but just sent it back in was tested positive for COVID. It is a lie on a grand scale. So there will be a royal commission into the response to COVID. Those who are found guilty of treason will face the death penalty. Those that are guilty of sedition will be imprisoned for life. Now, I mention that because people say, oh, this is Australia. We don't like the death penalty. Well, neither did I. But I can guarantee you when the Australian people find out what's been done and why it's been done and who profited from it, you'll be demanding it. You will actually be demanding, because most people have no idea of the gross level of depravity involved in this. And when you do, Australians thankfully are slow to anger. And I love that about we Australians. I like it. But when we get cranky, by Christ, I tell you what, we don't start many fights, but we finish them. And this is one we're going to finish. And for all of you Liberal Labor staffers out there listening at the moment, the old, excuse me for a moment, we're about to go black. The old Nuremberg defense of I was doing my duty won't wash. They tried it at Nuremberg, I was doing my duty, won't wash. Every one of you will be held to account. Soldiers are required by law to disobey an unlawful command. That same rule is going to be applied to every politician, every bureaucrat, every copper, and every soldier that did the wrong thing. They will learn that consequence-free politics is finished in Australia. This is no longer a game. This is deadly serious. We're going to rebuild the nation, and people won't want to go into politics because the cost will be so great if they mess up.
There's a question here that says, do you think any of these politicians start out with good intentions? Were they all turned by money and power?
Yeah, I'm sure there are many people in there that actually do, and they think they're doing the right thing. Let me tell you how it works in the real world. Here's how you get stuff done. In espionage, when you need to turn somebody, it's a pretty standard process. The sequence varies, but it goes like this. You offer them sex, and that works for the men best. Then you offer them money, then fame, then power. If none of that works, appeal to their ideology. If that doesn't work, you blackmail them. If there's nothing to blackmail them with, you fabricate something and blackmail them with that. If that doesn't work, you physically threaten them, then you physically damage them, and then you kill them. This is the real world. This is how the real world is done. So I don't care how honest you are when you started. You need testicles of titanium to survive this process, and a clean record. Now, nobody's got a clean record. And they only ever want people who are bent and broken and blackmailable. That's why you get these stooges, these goofballs as ministers. They couldn't run a corner store properly. And now they're the minister for something very important with a budget of 10 million bucks. Give me a break. They only ever select bent people. But the good ones, everybody's got a sin in their background. And it's whether you're happy to have it thrown up the front page or not is the only test. Now, here's the test. I've had, again, just going back to the beginning where people have been asking me on behalf of politicians, some names that you will know. You'll know. Well, what do you think about this guy? He's pretty good, isn't he? Well, has he said anything about the 90-year suppression order for VIP pedophiles? No. Well, no. I don't care how good he is. Silence is consent. Your failure to speak you've forfeited your right to be trusted. And it is bizarre, the values that I bump up against. Let me give you an example about bizarre values. Twitter, it's a bit of a sewer, but you've got to do it. And we were discussing it, things like full-term abortion and issues like that, which we are very strong on and have been for many years. And there wasn't much of a response. When I was asked if Australia One's policy was to legalise marijuana, I said no. Well, you should have seen the hue and cry. And here we were with these people who don't care about full-term abortion, but they wrote chapter and verse about how I was wrong about not legalising marijuana. Well, folks, that said everything about them and not much about me, I can tell you. And just while we're on that, to save the question, CBD oil, CBH oil, which is derived, the cannabis oil, is extremely good for health treatments, and it should be used. because it has the oil activates more receptors in the human body than any other substance at all, and it balances the entire immune system when it's taken. THC oil is also extremely good, and hemp, the actual plant, is excellent as a source of food, rope, material, you name it. It's one of the oldest and most effective plants. But smoking dope, no. And the reason's really simple. It's simple because this, our goal, and once again, our goal is to create that nation that we spoke about, self-reliant, strong, and legalizing dope doesn't contribute to that, so it's not in. And so people get to make a choice. I'm not saying I'm right, and I'm not saying I'm wrong. I'm just saying this is who we are. If you like us, vote for it. But it became clear today to these people, they would rather vote for a party that has full-term abortion as long as they can smoke dope. Well, guess what? I'm not all that fussed about having them in the party. They are free to have their opinion, and I respect that opinion, but give me a break.
Thank you. Ricardo, if Trump wins this election, what do you think, if any effect it would have on Australia?
All beneficial, I can promise you that. You might have guessed I'm a bit of a Trump fan. In fact, I dedicated my book to him, published last year. I wrote a book called Greatness Awaits You, The 5 Pillars of Real Leadership. But the effect of Trump, it's already just started. Trump's battle against the deep state is immense. And like many, I was frustrated with the ponderous nature of his progress until I got into this game and I realized I had the same problem in Australia when we become the party of government. Cleaning the deep state out is going to be, it's like cleaning the Herculean task, cleaning the Augean stables. That's the nature of the, oh, there you go. Somebody's got the book. The beneficial effect of a Trump win is he will reveal, by revealing the corruption in the US and China, the corruption in Australia will be revealed. Be prepared for countless by-elections in the next 12 to 24 months as these people are outed, locked up, charged, and put away for a long time. And Australia will be there to challenge every by-election, contest every by-election that we physically can. So whilst we've got a modest start with Tracy and myself, watch this space. Trump will reveal Trump's efforts in the US, because his job is to save the US. His job isn't to save the world or Australia. That's up to us. You've got to understand that. I get too many people hoping that Trump will save us. No, he's not. We've got to save ourselves. Now, the fact that he's in the US is great because it'll help our journey immensely. But it's still up to us to do it. So it's all good if the big Don wins.
Yeah, great. And this one kind of is in a similar vein. If A1 wins, will previous politicians be held accountable for donations and financial support they have given to others, e.g. Gillard's $300 million donation to Clinton?
Oh, yeah. And this is a bipartisan issue. We're going to have, the problem isn't figuring out how many royal commissions to have. It's, can we find a straight judge to do it? There's your challenge. But yes, there'll be investigation into Clinton and into all the prime ministers and ministers who have funded money. Malcolm Turnbull, the $444 million, $500 million almost, to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation up north. They didn't ask for it. They didn't know what to do with it. Strangely enough, they had more members on the board than members of the foundation. Apparently, I'm told that some of those board members were friends of Malcolm. And strangely enough, that board was a Clinton Foundation preferred partner not long after. Now, I'm not suggesting anything illegal was done, but something stinks. And yes, everything, every cent of your money that's been funneled to some crook will be investigated, and those guilty will be locked up for a very long time.
Thank you.
Just on that, while we're at it, let me throw some real terror into the minds of the politicians, both in Brisbane and in Canberra. You know how cabinet documents are only released after 30 years? Not sure if you're aware of that. You have to wait 30 years to find out what the cabinet discussed. Well, guess what? We'll be throwing the doors open. And the Australian people are going to see exactly what was discussed and why almost immediately. We'll release one every month. That'll give you a month to go through it. And you have 30 years worth of cabinet documents revealing the crooks, who paid who and why. And we're going to have to open up Pentridge Prison in Victoria, I think. We're going to have a lot of inmates. This is your country, folks, not the Pollies.
Not bad. Okay.
What's your next question? How am I still alive?
Yeah, I know, it's scary.
Yeah, the grace of God.
Yeah, definitely, I think. Okay, I've got a question here about charities. Would you impose a standard for all charities, like a minimum of, say, 60% raised must go to the needy?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of our policies. Trusts, charities, things like that, where it's a scam and for 5% goes to the needy and 95% go to fund lifestyle choices. If you ever look at the Clinton Foundation money, it's about 5%. Yes, there will be a minimum standard for charities to retain their charitable status, and there needs to be hard evidence of that. Along with that, churches will now start paying tax too. Now, I'm a man of faith, and we need churches, but I tell you what, we're being scammed. So, churches, you'll be paying tax, and if you're not actually doing good works with your money, then it's just a business, and you'll pay tax. This sort of nonsense has gone on long enough.
Great. Okay, and what do you see the state of Australia being in this time next year, especially when, in capital letters, you win this election?
Oh, Trump said it best. You'll be so tired of winning. We say, come on, there's more winning to be done. You'll say, no, no more winning. I'm tired of winning. I'll say, no, we've got to do more because we'll be winning more seats. And this is the point of turnaround. We're actually turning it around at this point. When we win, things will start to change. It'll be a lot of fun. And we'll get more and more A1 candidates in. And I hope all of you around here put your hand up and compete because this is going to be fun. And we don't want politicians. And don't tell me, oh, look, I can't speak well and I'm not. None of us can. I promise you, nobody's born with the gift. Tracy is, my goodness me, Tracy Dana Currumbin, what a fighter. All we want is a good Australian fighter. That's all we need. You'll learn as you go. Don't sweat it. But no, this time next year, a lot of smiles around the table. A lot of smiles. And people in time will look at us and wonder how the hell we did it. How did those dopey Australians on the arse end of the planet become the one safe repository for Western civilization, of Greek philosophy, of Roman law and English jurisprudence? And it'll be us. It's fallen to us, and we can do it. We can do this. This is going to be great.
Okay, well then the next question on that subject would be, how do you intend to celebrate your win this weekend?
Oh man, sleep in. No, it's and I'll answer this seriously. We'll have a drink or two, I guess. But the first thing I'll do is thank God. Because this is all an act of faith, guys. It really is. I've been, I guess, Christian all my life, but when you really get it, when I really got it, everything changed, and it's good. So I'll be thanking Him because we have a motto in our house: God's work, God's way. It's not about me. It's not about my wife. It's not about ego. Every night we pray, Your work, Your way, Lord. Whatever You want us to do, that's what we'll do. Win, lose, draw, it's okay. And so that's how we're going to celebrate. And then we'll have a few beers.
Deservedly. Okay, I'm going back to the text message from Lisa.
Yep.
Okay, the wars that we are involved in at the moment don't seem to be in our interests. They are being drawn out, and I think they are being waged for the wrong reasons. The initial reasons we were given, such as women's right in Afghanistan, seem to have resulted in a far worse predicament. What pressure can the state put on the federal government to bring our troops back home?
Well, the state can't, but I can tell you a politician with parliamentary privilege can do a lot. I can tell you this, just speaking out has already shaped federal policy. They've come out with policies similar to ours. They haven't done anything about it, but they've actually parroted our words and even our formats. So because they're bereft of ideas, they try to copy our stuff. But what can we do? Let's take the first point first, the wars that we fight. Should we have to fight wars? Yes. Why? Because most of the world out there is a mean and nasty place. It really is. Kumbaya doesn't work. And the only thing they understand is force. And this is from a long time living and working in hellholes all around the planet. They don't understand kindness, gentleness, concession. That's just considered weakness. So we need an intimidating military so people look at us and say, don't hit the Aussies because they kicked us in the ass last time and we don't want to go through that again. Let's talk about Afghanistan. And yes, as Lisa's question said, I remember it was 2007. It was such a breathtakingly stupid comment. I can still remember it to this day. I was in the bathroom. I just had finished having a shower, the towel wrapped around my waist, and I'm shaving in the mirror. And I had the Sunrise program on, and that imbecile David Koch made the following comment. We're in Afghanistan because it's a women's rights issue. And I stopped. I walked out, stared, and I couldn't believe this fool. Now, let me tell you the truth about Afghanistan. Should we have gone in? Absolutely. Why? There are bad things happening there, and I'd rather kill terrorists over there than wait till they get over here, because there is a genuine threat. Now, having said that, should we be there rebuilding their nation? No. No, soldiers and armies are there to kill people. That's what we're designed to do. Can we train? Yes. Is it our job? No. Why? Because we've had Australian soldiers die building an Islamic republic where girls get stoned to death for adultery if they get raped. So forgive me for getting a little bit hot-headed here, but give me a break. We go in, we fix the problem by delivering lethal force. That's what soldiers are for. If you want a negotiation, call the cops. That's what they do. They maintain the peace. Defense forces aren't designed for that. So we go in, we take out the bad guys in their caves because they're planning things against us, and then we come home. We don't spend 14, 15 years there and the rest watching our people try to do the impossible. It's a complete nonsense. We engage our military where it is in our strategic interest to do so. We look after our corner of the world, and when we have a federal Australia One government, we will have an expeditionary capability so we can go in and do what we need to do on our own. We don't need to plug in with anybody else. Right now, we have no capacity to move our troops. We have no capacity to conduct any operation of any decent size because we rely on everybody else for our stuff. It's amateur hour. No, we'll develop an intimidating military with full spectrum capability, land, sea and air forces, special operations, space force, cyber, offensive and defensive capability to keep us safe because we've been attacked for decades now. And that's not going to happen anymore. People will be afraid of us. Not Australians. Australians will be nice and happy. But those malevolent forces overseas, and I can tell you, I've seen them and I've worked with them. They're not like us, but a different color. They're different. Some are nice and some are not. Mostly not. So we will not engage in long-term wars where the military strategic end state is not clear, where the political end state is not clear. See, when I was in Canberra in the Department of Defence, it wasn't unusual, and this was just prudent planning. The government would say, look, there's a problem in this country. What, if anything, should we do from a military perspective? So we'd have a look at it. The Army, Navy, Air Force would contribute their bit. Special Ops would contribute their bit. We'd come up with a military strategic end state that said, look, these are the conditions by which, once we've fulfilled this, we will have succeeded in our mission. And that would contribute to the political end state that the politicians were designing. You ask your local member, federal member, what the strategic military end state in Afghanistan is, and they won't answer you because they don't have one. They're just burning money and people for no good reason. Now, having said that, don't think that the soldiers who died over there wasted their lives. They didn't, because we're soldiers. We sign up, we know that we might get killed, and we do our job. But from now on, no soldier will be deployed. Soldier, sailor, or airman will be deployed unless it is exactly clear why they're going in, what they've got to do, and what it looks like when they're finished. These endless wars that cost a ton of money and achieve no real advantage are over.
Okay, thank you. One more from the text. Recently, information was obtained from an education department about the non-disclosure to parents if their child was experiencing gender confusion issues. Many people believe that this may be caused by mixed messages from the educators. What can be done to ensure secrecy is not part of the education process?
It's not a misunderstanding. It is law in Victoria and certainly in New South Wales, and I'm not quite sure about Queensland, but I wouldn't be surprised. This is part of the agenda to get your kids, to confuse your kids, to damage your kids. Pure and simple. Now, let me go back in history. In 1957, a gentleman called W. Cleon Skousen was an undercover agent for the FBI in the United States. One of his jobs was to penetrate the United States Communist Party, to find out what they were up to, and so they could counter their actions in the US. As a result of his experience, he wrote a book called The Naked Communist, which I sincerely hope you should read if you don't get to read it. After this, when you've Googled The Great Reset, you need to Google the 45 goals of communism. The first 10 or so deal with the United States. It's interesting, but not relevant to Australia. The remaining 35 tick off how many have been imposed upon Australia. This is part of the communist plot to destroy the natural family. And they use the pedophiles to do it. That's why you get these weirdos in dress up reading stories to kids in school. Now in Queensland, you're not allowed to, in certain places, you can't hand out Christmas cards because that's offensive, but you can have a pedophile dressed up in a tutu reading stories to the kids. This is not an accident. This is not politically correct. This is part of the communist agenda to degrade, and you can read their own words. This isn't me on a flight of fancy. Read the 45 goals. As I said, an exquisitely designed and executed plan to destroy us from the ground up. They know what keeps Western civilization together better than we do. And they've been undermining it for decades. And so it's not an accident that the gender confused child is kept from the parents. It is state policy, because they want to destroy the family. They want to destroy your kids. How do we do it? We lock them up. The parent has primary responsibility for their child. Nobody, unless the parent is in breach of the law, has the right to get between a parent and their child. And yet it is in, you can look it up. And if you haven't seen my 5 threats video, look that up too on BitChute, and I explain it in detail. And actually read the Victorian Education Department's words that the headmaster and the teacher are going to make the decision on whether the parent is involved in this process. So you send little Johnny off to school in his shorts, he gets to school, the teacher will put him in a dress and call him Jane, and you're not supposed to know about it. Now, who the bloody hell gave those morons in the education department, people who barely passed their HSC, and now masquerade as teachers, who the hell gave them the right to get between you and your kids? We lock them up is what we do. You get between a mother and a father and their child, you go straight to bloody jail. And you can take your weird gender ideology with you. This is serious stuff, people. It really is. This is serious stuff.
Thank you. Got another one now about, hi Ricardo, do you have some information on citizen-initiated referenda?
Yes, I do. I'm a big fan of it. This ties in with political freedom and the will of the people. Citizen-initiated referenda are common in Switzerland, for example, and we're not going to use their model exactly. We have to make sure it's not used as a tool by troublemakers to stymie the political process. But if there is sufficient movement within the population for a referendum on an issue, that should be open to the people to put that forward. And then the politicians who work for the people say, okay, let's have a referendum on this subject. And it meets the criteria, and we have the referendum. So the will of the people can be imposed upon the politicians in between elections. And we're a big fan of those. The mechanics is careful. We've got to get the balance right. But absolutely, the people should be able to impose their will on politicians at any stage of the electoral cycle.
Great, thank you. Next one, Ricardo, do you believe in deportation for immigrants committing crimes in Australia rather than financing their prison sentences here in Australia?
Oh, yeah. Out you go. You, your family, you're gone. my wife and I lived in the United Arab Emirates for 5 years on a contract I had there. And we had a tremendous time. It was fantastic. But it's a police state, like most of those countries are. And you learn very quickly to behave yourself, because you don't get a telephone call if you get arrested. You just disappear into the desert, and sometimes you may or may not come back depending on the nature of the crime. But it was very clear. If you committed a crime, you are gone. You're out. Why the hell should you keep anybody in your country that is a danger to those people? They should go immediately. Immediately.
Great. Thank you. And would conscription be on the A1 agenda?
No. Having said that, the country would benefit from that, but being a big fan of free will and not imposing things from above, or imposing as little as possible on the people, we would certainly make it advantageous to those young men and women who wish to serve, because I know that even the Nashos, with some exceptions, but even the Nashos who reluctantly serve their time, they look back fondly and say, you know what, it straightened me up. And I had a conversation with a gentleman who served 3 years, and he said, I hated it at the time, but if I hadn't gone in, I'd have ended up dead or in jail. His own words. No, we would make it no conscription, but we would certainly make it advantageous. For example, if they wanted tertiary education, we could fund their university degree if they completed a set amount of service. If they wanted a trade, we could send them to trade school. If they wanted something else, we could do that as well. Fund that further development. Now, the benefit to the Defence Force would be immense. The benefit to the country would be incalculable. Incalculable. Because it instills in men and women basic habits and values, which unfortunately used to be part of the Australian culture, but over the last 20, 30, 40 years has drifted away. So no, there's no conscription, but we certainly want to encourage men and women to serve a minimum number of years, and they will be adequately compensated whilst they are serving, and then they will receive an additional reward after that.
Thank you. A question about nuclear power stations. What is the status to nuclear power station? Would you keep submarine contract currently running, which cost us billions of dollars, and first one we might see in 2030?
The submarine contract, in my opinion, was designed to strip us of a subsurface capability by that genius Malcolm Turnbull. Intentionally strip us of a capability. There's a capability gap between the end of the Collins class and the beginning of the new Pine Box class submarine. That's a joke, by the way. No, we'd end the contract immediately. We'd go straight to the Americans and say, we want to buy some of yours. We will maintain and service them in Australia. We'll start to build up a capability to do that. So we start to develop our own. In time, and that is in time, we will develop our own defence industry, manufacturing and developing our own equipment here in Australia. We intend to have at least 3 prime producers in Australia within 10 to 15 years. So we are self-reliant when it comes to military operations. But no, we'd kill that ridiculous concept that Pine and Turnbull stitched up.
Okay, thank you.
We'd also look at the F-35 if you're interested in that, because there are some massive problems with the F-35 which have not been made public. Welding, for example, apart from the fact that as an airframe it's brilliant as long as it doesn't get shot at. And it is so breathtakingly expensive that it distorts the entire defence budget in the wrong direction, leaving insufficient funds for the other services. But there are I've been told there are welding problems with the aircraft. There's all sorts of nonsense problems from the very beginning. So we're looking at the F-35 in detail. The submarines are definitely gone, and we'll be building up our own defence industry, which will increase our manufacturing skills and our own research and development skills across a wide range of areas, including, for example, chip design and manufacture, silicon chip design and manufacture. And for those of you not aware, the best way to describe the importance of designing and manufacturing our own chips, it's the equivalent of having gunpowder in the old days when gunpowder was first invented. We use Chinese chips. What do you think they're doing? They're controlling us. It's insanity. It's treason. But we'll have every aspect of our defence industry will then be grown. And once again, as I said, we'll be self-reliant in every respect that we can.
Okay, thank you. What is the A1 policy on refugees and detention and immigration in general?
Okay, immigration first. We choose who comes to Australia. We're allowed to choose who comes to Australia. Immigration will stop until we get the infrastructure that can cope with it. Brisbane's a shock at a drive-through. That's just bad planning and too many people. Sydney is the same. It's just nuts. They have the highways. It's basically you pay $10 for the privilege of sitting in a 12-kilometre car park. So we're going to stop immigration dead. We're going to get the infrastructure up and running. Wagga Base Hospital, for example, it has a capacity, I think, of about 45,000. The town's already got 55,000. Or they want to throw another 10,000 people. They can't cope. They can't cope. Nobody cares. The federal government brings in the migrants. The states have to pick up the tab. They don't do the planning. Everybody suffers. The reason they bring the numbers of people in, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's a numbers game. It makes the GDP look healthy, but it's not. It's a lie. Are we going to build roads, bridges, tunnels, rail, seaports, airports, hospitals, and make sure we've got the capacity to look after our people? Then immigration, when it kicks off again, will prioritise those who are culturally the best fit for Australia. It's as simple as that. It's not a race issue. So those that think I'm being racist, it's not a race issue. It's a culture issue. And if you don't believe me, tough. Right, that's the immigration one. What was the other one? Refugees. Now, the refugee situation, we've been conned. They sail through. The Refugee Convention is a UN convention. We're going to pull out of the UN, so that doesn't apply. Point number one. Because the UN is run by the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation, 57 Islamic states that drive the UN agenda. So we're pulling out of the UN. But their Refugee Convention says that you must accept a refugee, but not after it's travelled through 13 countries to get to you. And that's what happens. So we'll make sure they don't get here. And the Manus Island nonsense, just throw them back. The people on Manus Island are not poor refugees. These are, in fact, if you read the book of one of the guards that worked there, there's a whole bunch of them. They're Iranian playboys that got into a bit of trouble and thought they'd scarper off to Australia. Because if they went back home, they'd be thrown in jail for drug and sex crimes. And they were running around raping each other and raping people within the Manus Island camp, and then crying, poor and poor, woe is me. They had every opportunity to go back. We'll just fly them back and throw them back. We are under no obligation to accept crooks, spivs and liars from across the planet. And the Greens who push this are lying to you. Absolutely lying to you about it. The evidence is there. It's a con. The only reason the Liberal and Labor parties don't call it out is they're terrified of alienating the Green vote and their masters. And by their masters, I don't mean the people of Australia. I mean the people who actually call the shots in Australia. They've been told to sit back and let it happen. So no, we will accept refugees if it's in our interest and it's useful to help. But we're not going to take Iranians that wander halfway across the planet and then complain when they can't come to Australia. No, we decide.
There's a second question on this subject. It says, what is your plan on people on Christmas Island or people coming in boats? Will you assist them?
We'll assist them to go home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that answers that. Okay, there was a question about Julian Assange. When you have the... Sorry?
He's a hero. Next question.
When you have the power to do so, would you welcome Julian Assange back into the country?
So, we're more than welcome. We'll give him a medal. What Julian Assange did was save the planet. And that's not an overstatement. If Hillary Clinton had won the US election, we would be entering, and this is not an overstatement, a new dark age that would have lasted centuries. He saved the planet. He's an absolute hero.
Great. Could this election be rigged?
Yes, absolutely. The Chinese are involved in the count. They have the electoral rolls. Now, you can guess yourself why and who directed that to happen. Every election in the country is rigged. We haven't had an honest election in decades. I've been reliably informed that the 86 election that saw Hawke elected to the federal parliament, to the prime ministership, was a dodgy election. The Labor Party themselves were hooting and hollering, because previously they'd flipped electorates, but now they flipped enough electorates to flip the election. Most marginal seats are won or lost by a few hundred votes. What they do is, and the Labor Party admits this, it's in the records. They'll put 20 people in a bus and they go from booth to booth to booth, and they just vote multiple times. Already in this election, voters in Queensland have gone to the booth to vote and their names already crossed out, and nothing will be done about it because the Labor Party is up to their neck in crooked elections, and the Liberal Party does nothing about it too. I've been told the Liberal Party is to run dead in this election so Pallas-Chook can continue. Now, why do they want Pallas-Chook in there? Because Labor are such lunatics, they can push the globalist agenda faster than the LNP will be allowed to go, because the LNP voters are slightly less under the thrall of their leadership. They get Pallas-Chook to do what Comrade Dan's doing in Victoria. That's why they want her to win. Now, having said that, that's why we can't allow this to go to preferences. We have to make sure that the win in Rumban and the win in Nicklin is so overwhelming that it doesn't go to preferences, that we get there with 50% plus one vote. They can't dodgy the result. It has to be utterly overwhelming, and we will challenge the result, because with the we'll challenge the result, and until the truth comes out. At the Eden Monaro by-election, there was a by-election in Eden Monaro back in July, on the 4th of July. The Labor member quit and actually ran in that election. We offered it to one of our A1 supporters who lived in the electorate, but he declined. And so it was a case of lead from the front by example, get some brand recognition, name recognition. So we ran. We got only a handful of votes, but it didn't matter. We got tremendous coverage out of it, more membership, donations, and awareness. But the point of the story is this: in the vote that night, now counting the votes, the Liberal volunteers who were scrutineering realised that the counters were a lot of the young Labor people. So the young Liberals spotted the young Labor, but the young Labor are counting the votes, and they noticed a high number of formal votes for the Liberal candidate being put in the informal pile. Now they complained to Liberal headquarters, and Liberal said, "Oh, don't worry about it, we're not going to challenge the vote." Now you can come to your own conclusion. Maybe it was a done deal. Labor was going to win regardless. The fact that the Labor candidate left the council, of which she was a mere $14 million in the red, seemed to not hit anybody's radar. Nobody mentioned it, and she was recently sworn in. They spend your money and they move on. They spend your money and they move on. It's a con. So yes, the election is rigged. The result has to be so overwhelming that they cannot say that Tracy lost and they cannot say that I lost. We have to make sure that we get out there. And this is where, if you're of a mind to do so and you want to help, the best thing you can do is spread the word amongst those who haven't yet voted and say, you've got to vote. Put Tracy 1, put Bosi 1. Don't give us your second and third preference. It won't count. If it goes to preferences, forget it. Not going to happen. So yeah, it's rigged. We will fix it. We're going to put a bottle of Drano through the Australian Electoral Commission. We're going to put a bottle of Drano through the ECQ. And once again, it's in our policy. If you steal someone's vote, see the imbeciles in the two parties that actually the functionaries in the party, they actually believe that it's a bit of fun and games. Let's steal a vote here, let's steal a vote there. Well, let's see how funny it is when they spend 12 months behind bars for every vote they steal. Because the single most precious possession you have is your vote. Nothing is more precious than your vote. That's your right to say and dictate and decide who is going to govern you. That's enormously powerful. So every time you vote illegally, there's 12 months behind bars. You do it 10 times, there's 10 years behind bars. Let's see how funny it is then. Now, for those in the conspiracy to organise it, you get 5 to 10 years just off the bat. And then the organisations, the party, the chief executives, and anybody in the chain of command you'll be hit as hard as the worst company under ASIC rules. You'll spend 20 years behind bars. Once again, consequence-free politics is finished in Australia. The game, it's no longer a game. You steal votes, you interfere with somebody's right to political freedom, you'll spend time behind bars and you won't get out. This is another extremely serious issue that most people have got no idea about. But they'll learn. The first one goes in. The Antifa mob in US, they started arresting them. They were crying like little babies. Oh my God. Oh dear me, I'm being locked up. Really? Well, get used to it. Same's going to happen in Oz.
Thank you. So we've got a few more that have just come in. How will you expose the climate change agenda?
You don't need to. People believe it or they don't. We're just going to stop the subsidies. We're going to generate cheap, reliable power, one of our economic advantages. And let me tell you how we're going to do it. Victoria's got a ton of brown coal. You want to burn brown coal? You fill your boots. You got black coal, burn your black coal. You got hydro, spin those turbines. We don't care. It doesn't matter to us. And just by the way, for those that don't know, the planet requires a minimum level of CO2 to support life, plant life, and therefore our life. And if you look at the graph, it's crashing. The CO2 level is near extinction levels, just by the by. But we don't need to persuade anybody. We just say, that's it. No more subsidies, no more windmills, which cannot be recycled. I don't know if you know that. The windmills cannot be recycled, so they're burying them. The windmills never generate as much electricity or energy as was used to build them. So you're in deficit already anyway. It's a scam, it's a con, and the money is going to Saudi Arabia to build the windmills. The money's going everywhere, but here, it's another scam and a con. Free solar cells, they're not free. You're paying for it through your taxes. There's nothing free. So we just stop the subsidies. And all of a sudden, you'll get cheap, reliable power. Now, how do we get the power stations going? You want to build coal-fired power station, you can do it. Fill your boots. If the electorate doesn't want it in their electorate, then it doesn't go there. That's quite simple. You won't have it imposed upon you. It'll be somewhere where the people want it. So the cheap power comes in. The infrastructure, part of the infrastructure we're going to build, everyone's talking about it now, but they haven't been until the minor parties started banging on about it, the Bradfield scheme. We start in Tully, we start damming the river up in Tully. We stop the flow of fresh water onto the Great Barrier Reef, and that'll help with the health of the reef, because fresh water and reefs don't work well. But we're going to divert that inland, and we're going to green central Queensland. Instead of being a flat brown dust bowl like out of Charters Towers, it'll be the land of milk and honey. It'll be generating so much food we'll feed ourselves and the rest of the world. And that water will flow all the way down to the New South Wales border. On top of that, we'll be putting in along the channels and the canals and the pipes. We'll be putting in what they call Whirlpool Turbines, which are no bigger than about 1.5 meters in diameter. And the water flows and it spins. There's no actual moving parts. It's a turbine. It's brilliant. And it generates enough, each one of those generates enough energy, power, to supply a town of 2,000 people. So you'll have hydropower from Tully all the way down to the border. This stuff's not hard, folks. It's not hard. This is easy to do. You just need the political will. Now, in the old days, political will meant greasing the palm of some crooked Polly. But if you want it, we're going to do it.
Well, there's another question now about free energy, which is what would A1 support funding to explore free energy devices such as the Nikola Tesla technology?
Yep. 0 point energy, apparently, this is free energy transmitted through the ether, just like radio waves. This is Nikola Tesla invented it a long time ago. Proved it. JP Morgan bought paid for the IP and buried it. And we've been plugging things into walls ever since. Now, allegedly, a lot of this stuff will be coming out. And if it does, that's fantastic. But there's a couple of things we've got to be careful about. Electromagnetic radiation of any sort is at the wrong frequency, at the wrong intensity, is deleterious to human life. It affects cells. So 0 point energy might be okay, but we have to check it. It's just like the 5G towers. The frequency and intensity of that radiation is killing people. So if it comes out and if it is proven to be safe, then yes, we'll go for it. Not a problem at all. But we're not going to wait on a hope and a prayer, on a wing and a prayer. We're not going to wait. We've got stuff to do immediately. So we'll start now. And when it comes, great. If it doesn't come, we're still good. We're moving ahead. This is the great lie that we've been given. Just wait a bit longer, wait a bit longer. 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more months. No. So yes, if the free energy is real and it's doable and it's safe for human and animal life and plant life, then we'll do it. But otherwise, we're moving ahead to get that competitive advantage we have for our economy, because without our economy, we have nothing else. We can't. That pays for our life here.
Thank you. So there's another question. The WEF and IMF have proven their intentions are not in our interests. The Citizens Party has a plan for a national bank using post office branches and generating credit by building infrastructure within this great country. Are you aware of this plan and do you support it?
I support it because it's very similar to one that we came up with without looking at their policy. We can, the key part to this is we pull out of their system. We maintain control of our money supply. We do that through issuing of bonds. Part of that investment will be into infrastructure to fund that. And so it's very similar and quite independent, to be honest. We didn't check you out at all. So I think it's just a good idea that makes sense. So yes, we're in favor of it. And we have a very similar plan. But the key part is to pull out of the global system and to maintain control of our money supply, which we can do. And we have a very talented banker on our team that's been working the numbers to make sure that is an effective and real solution, not just a statement of intent.
Okay, on the same subject, bank bail-in issue, your thoughts?
Okay, for those of you who don't know, the bank bail-in laws were passed, which means the banks can take money out of your account if the banks look like failing. I don't know if you knew that. That's already been passed. It was done in Greece and we were shocked, and now it's done here. What you were never told is you think your savings account is a savings account where you get your money. The bank considers it an investment account. That's why you get interest. So the banker will say, no, it's an investment account, and if we're going to go broke, we're going to take your money. Now, who knew that? Who knew that your savings account was actually an investment account? Nobody. You thought that that was your money. No. Okay, so what we're going to do is we have a solution to that. Once again, if you wish an account that pays rates of interest, then you can call it an investment account, but there is a risk to that. We will compel the banks, and this clarifies the situation for everybody, so it actually works out well. If you want an account which just holds your money, and then you have the convenience of ATMs and using it digitally, you can do that, but you'll pay a nominal fee for that privilege. You don't get interest because it's a service being provided to you if you wish to use it, but you're not compelled to. But right now, money can be taken out of your account. Now, I know this for a fact because one of my colleagues had $750,000 taken out of his account. And it was illegal for him to ask where the money went and who took it. Illegal. He wasn't allowed to ask. Now, think about that for a minute. Now, when I tell that story, most people go, well, screw him. $750,000, he doesn't need the money. But that's not the point. If they're going to take his money, you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to take yours too, because if they fail, they're going to take your money. Now, what sort of business model is that? I've been in business. Many of you have too. And you know that if you take a risk and it goes belly up, it comes out of your hide. Well, these bankers want to make sure it comes out of your hide even when it's their mess up. So we're aware of it. We have a plan to fix it and make sure that your money is protected.
Thank you. A question on gun laws. What is A1's policy on legalizing personal arms, gun laws, etc., like America?
I love this one. I get this asked a lot. And I put up a poster and it has a picture of a pistol and it says, for tyranny. And then it's got a picture of a sniper rifle. It says, for long-range tyranny. And it has an automatic weapon that says, for lots of tyranny. Gun laws in Australia. Who can remember Smiley Gets a Gun? You know, Smiley movies way back when, Chips Rafferty and things like that. We had a gun culture in the country which was pretty sensible. And it was a rite of passage for a young boy or young girl to be worthy of, be responsible enough to get their own rifle, an old 22, let's say. My view is this, our view is this. I'm a big fan of the Second Amendment in the United States. Because gun laws for me aren't about hunting. That's just a side benefit. I don't trust governments. And the reason why people around the planet have been stripped of their weapons is so they are not a threat to the government. That's why the Democrats in the United States are so big on gun control. Now, just on this, so you're aware, the cities in the US with the worst gun crime are the cities with the strongest gun control. The cities and states in the US with the least gun crime are the ones where they have their Second Amendment. Now, they have a gun culture that they understand. Australia no longer does. But my view is this. We should have the right to protect ourselves. As the old saying goes, when seconds count, the police are just minutes away. The right to protect yourself is fundamental. Now, that's not in the Australian psyche like it is in the US. But then again, most Australians haven't spent their time with a weapon in their hands, like I have. It is important to our sovereignty. Now, can you imagine Dan Andrews trying what he's trying if he had an armed population? Absolutely not. See, people think that we've evolved beyond violence. We haven't. We haven't evolved beyond it at all. We need the right to protect ourselves sensibly. That doesn't mean we go issuing every lunatic with an M4. It takes time. We have to slowly reintroduce the concept, training, safety, and make sure people understand what it is to hold a weapon in your hands. But our view is in time, we should have the right to bear arms as a protection against tyranny.
Thank you. Question about the media. What would you like to do with the mainstream free media? Take it over or dismantle it altogether?
Make it irrelevant. That's the best way to do it. You've got mainstream media, which is sold out to anybody that wants to pay them. They just need to fill ad space. They don't actually provide news. They just provide distraction. The ABC and the SBS, the stations that you pay for, are the official organ of the Chinese Communist Party. There isn't a socialist idea they don't like. We're going to amalgamate SBS and the ABC. We're going to cut the budget in half. We're going to rewrite the charter and compel them to stay by it. We're going to sack the talking heads. Every lefty is going to go. It's going to start producing quality Australian drama, quality Australian history at a primary, secondary and tertiary level that can be used to inform homeschooling. Real history, the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, not the nonsense that's pumped into our heads. And then we're going to make citizen journalism, which is taking off around the country, as strong as possible to make it to make the commercials and the free-to-air absolutely irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. Because they're being used to destroy us, dumb us down, make us stupid. Stalin said if he could control Hollywood, he'd control the world. The kids today think that they believe what they believe because they've come to their own conclusion. They don't realize that when you tell a story, rather than a news item, for example, we willingly suspend our own disbelief. The prefrontal cortex, which is involved with decision-making and judgment, is bypassed. It goes straight to the back of the brain, and so you get emotionally involved. And you absorb that and you think it's true. And that's how it works. The model for Hollywood has changed over the decades. And for a long, long time now, well, in the old days, a studio wanted to make a movie to make money. So it had to meet the needs of the audience. And so it had to have a top-flight director, a top-flight actor, and a really good story. And then they risked millions of dollars to produce a film, hoping that people would buy their $2, $3, $10, $15 ticket as the years went by. And that's how they made their money. They had to meet the needs of the people. That hasn't been the case in Hollywood for years now. China turns up. Middle Eastern countries turn up with a bag of gold and they say, make the movie. Now, the studio chief doesn't care whether he sells one ticket. He's got his money up front. And so all that trash that you see coming out of the United States is prepaid by China to undermine And this isn't theory. You can look this up, folks. I've been saying this for years. But to undermine the moral and psychological well-being of the nation. This is the Opium War 2.0, but instead of using opium, China's using our movies against us. And that's how they do it. That's how they do it. And I can remember back in the 60s, even as a young boy, because I'm 60 years of age, so I've been around the buoy a few times. I remember watching shows thinking, this is not right, this is wrong, something's going on here. So it's just not news. It's the entertainment and news that is shoved down our throats. 6 corporations on the planet control all the media and all the entertainment. Think about that. 6 corporations own it all. And you'll wonder why we're getting the same message from every station. So, back to the answer, make him irrelevant. We control our national broadcaster. We promote our values, our civilization, proudly, with the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Where we messed up, that'll be made clear. Where they messed up, that'll be made clear too. The upside of Greek philosophy, Roman law, English jurisprudence, the lot, it'll be there. And it'll explain why the entire world is trying to get to the West and they're not making their way to Bangladesh and Upper Volta. There's a reason for it. Our culture is the strongest and best for producing a civilization that creates a good life. And so we're going to make sure that our news informs the people of that.
Thank you. There is a question about abortion. Do you agree with abortion under 12-week gestation?
The reason I'm pausing is because we're tightening it up. As you know, full-term abortion is being pushed by Emily's List, which is the female arm of the Australian Labor Party, Julia Gillard, Penny Wong, Tanya Plibersek, all those lunatics, unhinged abortion extremists. It started in Victoria, then Tasmania, then Queensland, then New South Wales. Queensland has voted against it, but it's still got foisted upon you. They kill babies up to and including the moment of birth. The body is not considered a child. It's considered medical waste. It has no death certificate. It has no funeral. The body parts are on-sold to corporations for product development. That's the truth of it. It has got to that point because people didn't speak up. So, full-term abortion, they're even talking about post-birth abortion and saying personhood shouldn't be granted until 2 years of age. This is the most depraved sickness that penetrates our country at the moment, and people are silent on it because men are too cowardly to have an opinion and women are too stupid to realize that, guess what? You only get pregnant by choice. Except for rape and incest, you get pregnant by choice. Ladies, I don't mean to be rude, but you want to be treated as equals, then this is the time to step up. So our policy on abortion is this, and I hate to be harsh, but this is babies' lives. No abortion after 2 weeks, because you have the morning after pill, you have inserts, you have the pill, you have so many means of not getting pregnant, so many means. Now, I know that they fail. I have friends and colleagues that need extremely high dosages of contraceptives to not get pregnant, and even then they still get pregnant. So we're going to introduce this policy. I'm going to give you the bad news first and the good news second. No abortion after 2 weeks, except in the case of incest and rape, or there is massive deformity, or there is a threat to the woman's life. We will include testing to make sure that before you're issued a contraceptive, it is tested to make sure that it's going to work for you, so you don't take the contraceptive and then find yourself pregnant. We're going to make sure there is testing along the way to make sure the health and the mother of the health and the baby are both looked after. But the hard news is this: it is a human life. And those that say, in fact, I saw these 2 young ladies, I don't know, late teens, early 20s, with the poster, "Parasites have no rights." That's what they consider a child to be, a parasite. The heart beats after 12 days. This is now adult land. And the callous indifference of a certain group of women beggars belief. It absolutely beggars belief. These are children. And because we didn't say no at one point, we didn't say no at the next point, we didn't say no at the next point, and now they're doing it at full term. It's bloody murder. So no, you don't want to have an abortion, don't get pregnant. And this isn't because I'm a bloke. This is just human life. And you don't have to be a Christian to appreciate it. Because every woman knows that that child moving inside of you is a child. And every woman knows, and my wife will give you this story if you want. With the first child, the hormones were going insane, and she got a phone call and said, "You've won $1 million. Just sent $10,000 or $3,000 to this address." And in her muddled pregnancy brain, she had sent off $3,000 and rang me up and said, "Hey, guess what?" I didn't hold her to account, but that's how bad judgment is when you're pregnant. We get that. With the second child, she was so messed up. She didn't know it at the time, but she was having an MS attack. But all of a sudden, she felt so detached from reality. She wanted to walk out into the middle of the highway to kill herself. And she had not a thought for the child. So when a woman is pregnant, the idea is you love them both and you give them all the massive support you can to make sure that they are healthy and the baby remains healthy. Love them both. Because a decision made in that frame of mind is one that lasts forever. And there was a woman, a 72-year-old woman the other night, and she was still crying over an abortion she had as a young girl. It's not a game. This is not something stupid. This is real life. This is for adults now. And that's why we're so strict on this, because nobody spoke up before. And one last statement. When a crime is committed, the victim doesn't raise charges. The government does. The Crown versus Smith, because Smith did something bad. So this isn't because I'm a bloke. This is because it is just wrong. My wife agrees, and she's definitely not a bloke, and there's a whole bunch of us that agree. So once again, no abortion after 2 weeks, except for rape, incest, massive deformity of the child, and a risk to the mother's life. And testing to make sure that they have all the contraceptives, and it'll be illegal to prevent people giving those contraceptives. Sorry to be so harsh, but there you have it, folks.
Thank you. A question about the support system. Do you have any plan to fix our sick support system and create a healthcare system that promotes healthy behaviours and lifestyles to treat disease causes instead of medication to treat symptoms?
Absolutely. We're going to focus on wellness rather than illness. We're going to extract the pharmaceutical industry from the whole process. Just an understanding of this. My wife suffers from MS, as I said. When she was first diagnosed, she was diagnosed a month after we were married, and she spilled some boiling water on her foot and she couldn't feel it. She couldn't walk 50 meters without needing to sit down. We went to the neurologist. The neurologist said, "Look, this is 2009, January 2009. I've got some a medical treatment for you, a regime. However, you will be in a wheelchair in 18 months and dead in 3 years." That was 2009. My wife, being a robust individual, used some colourful language to suggest she wouldn't be following his advice. We looked at an alternative approach, and I do the cooking at home, and so I got rid of as much processed food as I could and cooked everything fresh. And didn't matter whether it was a risotto alla marinara or what. But I made the fish stock myself, the tomato puree myself from fresh tomatoes, and you could literally taste the energy in the food. And it fades after about 3 days, but the energy, the life force in the food was extraordinary. She went from not being able to walk 50 meters to walking 3.5 kilometers down a sandy beach just on diet improvement. Big Pharma has successfully destroyed health on this planet. It's not in their interest to cure people. It's in their interest to continue selling drugs. So they don't want healthy people. And so, as was asked the other night, shall we move some of the subsidies that go to the drug companies to alternative? We shouldn't call it alternative. We should call it natural health. And we should call Big Pharma unnatural health. And the answer is yes. We want Queensland to become the centre for natural health remedies. Obviously, check to make sure there aren't any shysters or conmen out there. But make sure that Queensland becomes the centre of natural health remedies of all sorts, and make sure that it's tested, it's effective, and then distributed widely throughout Queensland, Australia, and potentially the world. We want a wellness model, not an illness model.
Thank you. There is a question. Sorry, I'll just go back up. Where is it? It says, I have seen clips of hundreds of howitzers moving through Northeast USA on trains. Are you aware of this, and what could it signify?
No.
No.
Hopefully Trump's keeping the Canadians out. I'm completely unaware of howitzers moving up north in the US. I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Okay. There was another one that I saw here, and I don't actually know what it means, but it says, are you aware of Canzuk? That's CANZUK.
Yeah, I think this relates to an alliance between the Anglophone world, Canada, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and US, otherwise known as Five Eyes. Now, we as the Anglophone world, there's a level of trust between us, and we share intelligence. However, it's been abused, and now is the source of. It's the method by which the deep state controls those nations. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the UK has lost, Canada has lost, New Zealand has lost. That leaves Australia and the US. We will be reviewing any relationship, particularly intelligence sharing relationship, with everybody. Because what we think is going on isn't. The deep state runs these nations, and they would rather burn to the ground life on Earth as we know it rather than lose. So I'm aware of these relationships, but they require, again, a root and branch examination to make sure that Australia is safe. We have to become independent, self-reliant. And when we turn up to the negotiation table, we arrive with heft. We don't turn up with our cap in our hand begging for assistance from people.
Thank you. And there is a question that's just come through about what would the laws be, the A1 laws be on welfare NDIS?
Sorry, say that again, please.
What would your laws be on the welfare system and NDIS?
Yeah, NDIS is a troubled program. It's not an insurance scheme. It was a thought bubble by Julia Gillard. It was never properly designed nor funded, and it never actually met the needs of the many parents, the many parents who had lobbied for many years, who genuinely need assistance for their children, for whom they are worried for when they pass their kids will not be able to be looked after. It turned into a scam where if you've got asthma, you can get somebody to do the lawn for you. NDIS needs a complete reboot. It's an utter waste of money, and the people who most deserve it aren't necessarily getting it. It's a good idea, maybe, but certainly the way it's being planned and executed now, it's just a waste of time and money.
Okay, thank you. And one that says, would you close Pine Gap?
It depends. Pine Gap as a facility, I'm not sure exactly what's in there. I've heard some horrific stories about what goes on there. I've heard some other stories. It's just common garden variety surveillance, intelligence gathering, which is required of a modern nation state. We'll certainly be reviewing all relationships with the United States and any other country that has facilities in Australia to make sure it's in Australia's best interest.
And exit the World Health Organization?
The World Health Organization is run by Dr. Tedros, who is the number 3 man in an Ethiopian communist government. And yes, the WHO can go to hell.
And view on DVA?
DVA?
Yeah.
Again, DVA has failed miserably in its responsibility of looking after veterans. If you're too crazy or not crazy enough, they won't look after you. If you're just right, then you're fine. But too many are falling off the perch. In addition to that, the ADF has been used for drug trials by sociopathic pharmaceutical companies, which have led to suicide, death, marriage breakup. And it is a massive scandal, and nobody is saying a thing about it. I mentioned it last week on my weekly program called The Ark, and I read out a message from a soldier about how it's destroyed his life, and all he wants to do is make sure others aren't similarly destroyed. That needs to be exposed. People need to be charged and locked up.
Thank you. And do you have any tools or tips to help use and develop discernment when watching our politicians to help us sort out truth from fiction when they talk, or is it all fiction?
So if their mouths are moving, they're lying. Don't listen to what they say, look at what they do, and hold them to account. Because I promise you that they're part of the party machine. The party machine puts out the talking points, and they parrot the talking points. They make all the promises under the sun, and 3 years later, nothing's happened. Look at what they deliver. Pin them down, hold them to account. If they fail, sack them. And that applies to everybody, including A1.
I think that we might have got to the end of the questions. There was a nice comment there from Gregory, who says it's been a pleasure to listen. It will be an honor to help you help us.
Well, that's it. It's about the people. We can only do so much. We're like a training team, I guess. We go in, but it's up to the people of Australia to save their country. It's our job to help you get there. But once you're in power, once you've got the branches up and running, once you've got your candidate, it's over to you, blue leader. We've got the structure and the framework for those that agree with our policies and the future we want to see for this country. And we'll need opposition, and that's fine. I've got no problem with that. We have people that are vociferously against me. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I have a particular vision, so does the party. And if you have another one, you should pursue that separate vision as well. There's nothing wrong with that. This is not about we know the lot, we don't. We're all struggling to do the best we can, to face challenges that none of us ever imagined we'd be facing. But it's up to each individual who signs up and joins up to learn as much as they can and take their country back. And if you've got a lot of grey hair, that just suits us fine, because a lot of the young kids don't quite get it. And by young, anybody under the age of 40, they just don't get it. And so we've got a good demographic spread within the party. We're slightly higher on the females. I think it's 56% female, 54, 64 female, male. So a good spread across the sexes. We've got a good spread across the age brackets. It's growing in the younger groups, believe it or not. The youngest demographic group, sort of 18 to 25, is growing, which I find inexplicable, grateful but inexplicable. But we've got a good group of men and women of a certain age, let's say, who've still got a bit of fight left, and they want to die with their boots on and leave a good place for their kids and grandkids. So that's exactly right, Tracy. Thank you. It is up to each individual to take control of their little patch of dirt, and collectively we can make sure that the country becomes this magnificent place that it actually once was. It really was. And we're going to get there again. And the goal is to be such a shining example to the rest of the world. They're going to look at us stunned and wonder how the hell did they do that. We'll help them, but we're going to be a great place. When we pass, we'll smile and know that we did a good job.
There has been one question just coming on mandatory vaccinations in Australia. Do you want to address that one?
Sorry, what's that? Sorry?
There was a question that just came in about mandatory vaccinations in Australia. Yeah. Do you want to address that?
No mandatory vaccinations. Good God, no. If you want vaccinations, of course you should have vaccinations made available to you, without a doubt. But are you aware that I don't think there's one vaccination that's ever been double-blind tested? Not one. And what's in the vaccinations, again, many of you will know this because this is a sort of an informed group, but it has heavy metals, it has fetal cells from aborted babies, it has all sorts of nonsense in it. And it's almost like Dr. Mengele in the concentration camps, just injecting people with stuff to see what happened. No, you shouldn't be forced to take a, in fact, the legislation has already been passed. And for those of you who don't think that this has been planned, this scamdemic, because it is a scam, it's been planned because the legislation in allowing police, say in WA, and I'm fairly certain it's in Victoria and Queensland too, but don't hold me to that. Certainly in WA, the legislation that allowed the police to forcibly hold you down and inject you was passed in 2016. Now, how about that? Talk about planning ahead. 4 years ago, they put that through. So when the scandemic popped up, the legislation's in place. Again, we've been played. The depravity of the politicians is just breathtaking.
Thank you. Stephen Lena, thank you, Ricardo and Tracy, for standing as candidates in Queensland election. You're both legends. Thanks to the rest of the A1 support team for all you are doing. Let's take our country back.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've found tonight informative. And as I said at the beginning, whether you stick with us or not is not the point. What's important is every Australian now stands up and begins to fight for what they believe in. And if that happens, then we'll be a better place than we are today. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all well. Thank you very much, Tracy, for facilitating this evening. And if I was a Labor Party man, I'd say vote early, vote often. But we won't do that. Let's just vote once.
And for anybody that's interested in you using Facebook, you can actually put a temporary frame on your profile picture. If you go in and search Australia One or Ricardo, Bosi or Tracy, Takax Dawn, there's some nice little frames that you can put on your profile picture for the next few days. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Ricardo.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.
And thanks, Grace.
Thank you.